Well, hello. I'm in a motel room right now. Um, but it's time for another exciting episode of, and I'm going to say it quietly because it's too late at night, Pens in Use. This is the show where I talk about the fountain pens and inks I've been using throughout the week. So let's dive into it. If videos like this interest you, where I talk about fountain pens both new and old and at all price points, I would invite you to subscribe. Hey, what do you think of when you hear the letters AI? I'll tell you what, I live in an agricultural area and it sure showed when I told my students where I was going to be. We'll talk about that after we take a look at the pens. So let's look at some pens. Alright, so these are the pens I've been using this week. Let's I'll line them up properly. And I actually have two updates to bring you. So let's dive into the pens, because there's a lot in this Pens in Use. So I have, from left to right, a Lamy 2000, a Nakaya Neo Standard Writer, a Parker Ellipse, a Parker 61. Yes, I said 61, don't get mad. Platinum 3776, actually my first one I ever bought. I have a Geha 722. I have a Montblanc 226 and a Kaweco All Sport. As always, I'll be doing my writing in this cognitive surplus theory notebook. Feeling a little guilty that that's my last entry, but life. Try to find a happy medium with the brightness, but anyway, I may adjust it as we go along, and I may be sorry when we get to the editing. But the first pen is a Lamy 2000. This has a fine nib in it. This is the pen I carry with me every day to work. And yeah, beautiful macrolon finish. Definitely worn smooth over years of being used. Very plain, unassuming pen. Nobody says, "Oh my gosh, can I borrow that?" Because they don't care. It doesn't look like anything. Even uncap it doesn't look like much. Semi-hooded nib. And then you write with it and you're, wow! So, Lamy 2000 with a fine nib in it. I'm on a quest to use up all my bottles of ink. Right now, my black ink that I'm using up is Omas Black, a discontinued ink. I have a ways to go on it, which you can't tell now that I've tipped it on its side and gotten it all over the side, but I'm probably more than halfway through it. So the Omas company has recently come back into being. I have heard comments from both ways. You know, some people think that it's as good as the originals, just different. Other people say, oh, it's nothing like the old days. And you know what? I don't know. I have no personal experience. And I don't really have a dog in that fight. But that's Omas Black. I have two Omas pens, which are older, which I like very much. As far as the new ones, don't know. My next pen is this Nakaya Neo Standard Writer Edition. I forget what it's called. I'll put the correct name in the video description. Okay, I'll just be honest, I forgot what it's called. Usually I have the list right here beside me, and I didn't make it this week. This one, honestly, has not written in a few days, so I'm curious to see how it does. It didn't want to start there, but then it's going just fine. It is railroading more than usual, but, you know, I better put question marks by the name just to cover myself in case I totally butchered its name. The nib in it is a soft fine, but it's been ground by nibs. That is so not how you spell ground. Ground to Extra Flexible by nibs.com. They do that. So it's not an official Nakaya because it has been altered. And I like Platinum because this is a Platinum pen, really, and a Platinum 3776 nib. I like their soft fine. This one, you know, for being called a writer's pen, because writer is in its name somewhere, I'm sure of it, it is not the pen I would pick for my daily writing. This is more of a fun pen. I never said what ink's in it. Krishna. Ghat green. So Mountain Pass green. It's actually a very attractive green. It kind of reminds me of a green that I really like, the Sailor Epinard. This is the Parker Ellipse. Yeah, I like the looks of it. I've always complained it's too dry, but I'm having some luck with this ink in it, because this is a kind of a wetter ink. So the nib in this one, I don't remember what it is. Okay, medium is a medium. And the ink is an older ink. I don't think they make it anymore, or if they do, it's under a different name, but Monteverde. Turquoise. And like I said, I'm trying to use up ink, and this is one that I am trying to use up. And this one I'm quite close. I think if I put it into a few wet pens, it will be gone pretty quickly. So probably not this pen. But I do like how fun this pen is with this ink in it. Monteverde Turquoise. And yeah, not a lot of ink in it. I have to tilt it on its side to fill it. Pretty soon I'm going to have to put it in a different container to fill from it. And then we get the interesting Parker 61. Interesting mainly because of its filling mechanism and this very cool rainbow cap, which they only made for a while and then they decided it cost too much. This pen always starts up. I don't know what size nib it is, so I won't tell you. But the ink in it is Herbin. Another ink I'm trying to use up, but I like this ink. So it's one I'm going to remember that, oh yeah, I want to buy more of that. So yeah, my first impressions will always be done with Parker Quink Washable Blue. But I've gotten so I appreciate Herbin more and more. And I think when I get my stash of bottles down, I'd like to try just a variety of samples from the brand and explore. I might be dead before I've used up enough ink to get to that point, but you know, gotta have something to shoot toward. Alrighty, so then this pen was my very first very first Platinum 3776. It's in the shoji finish, so it has the lakes around the really famous mountain in Japan, whose name has totally slipped my mind as soon as I had to say it. Mount Fuji, sorry, it slipped me there for a minute. But anyway, very nice. Has that slip and seal mechanism, which is good because this ink has some interesting traits. So this is the Platinum. I actually did 2 videos on this. This is my first, oh my goodness gracious, that's not good. So this is my first survivor pen or revisit to a pen, because over the years of owning it, when I first bought it, I just like, wow, what an awful pen. And then after I owned it, you know, I inked it up and I got to liking it. So there's just something about this pen that I appreciate. So what I'm doing right now, because you can't see it, is I'm kind of pushing some ink into the nib. So we'll talk about the problem with the ink once I start writing with it. So the ink I have in it is actually called Krishna Kanikonna. And Kanikonna ink is, it's one that likes to form crust in a lot of pens. So a lot of pens you'd have crust all over the nib by now, but not in this pen. But apparently it does form enough crust that it does dry up. This has a regular medium nib in it. But anyway, I bought it. I criticized it pretty heavily, kept using it, and then did a revisit where I said, okay, might have been wrong with my original impression of this pen. Because I do like it now. For a little while, I think it's the second set of ends that's doubled. For a little while, it did go into my group of pens that I was going to sell or trade. But then I rescued it and said, no, I want to keep it. So I'm keeping it, for better or for worse. So, yeah, I enjoy it. It's a unique look. I think Platinum got better with these special editions as time went on. They certainly got more expensive. And, yeah, I own most, but not all of the nib sizes because extra fine and ultra extra fine hold no interest to me. So here we have a vintage Geha 722. Doesn't look like much, but it's one of those slim black vintage pens that I like, probably from the 1970s. Yeah, that's sweet. 722. And did I mention that this has an oblique broad nib in it? That's why this ink is in it. Another, at least temporarily discontinued ink. So this is Sailor Jentle Apricot. I love the smell of Sailor inks. Now, as a chemistry teacher, I don't recommend going around and smelling everything, but I do love the smell of these inks. There's just whatever preservative it is they use, it just smells really good, or fungicide or whatever it is. My second to last pen has a bird splat on it. I got criticized, well, I've been criticized more than once for calling it a bird splat. The bird splat on the other end got broken off. But I like this pen. Now, I don't own any modern pens with a bird splat. I think my newest one is from the 80s. But you know what? The ones that I do have, which are all older, I like very much. Like this Montblanc 225. And this has an extra fine nib in it. I know because the sticker's still on it. The ink in it is Pelikan. 4001 Violet. Just a very attractive ink. I don't think it gets enough attention. I think it's a very nice color. Yes, there's all kinds of shades of violet out there from all kinds of different companies. But I really like this one. And the pen itself, kind of like a little flashier, but not too much flashier than the Lamy 2000. Macrolon, obviously not as well worn. All in all, an attractive pen. And finally, what's been my companion for the summer and into the fall a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of the Kaweco Sport. Don't shoot the messenger, but it's true. But I do like this pen. I don't know if it's because the nib is a little nicer. But this has been my companion a lot in my pocket this summer. Sometimes it gets ink around the nib collar there, and that's annoying, but I like it. So it's the Kaweco All Sport. Called so because it's aluminum and it puts together to make a nice sized pen. And I don't normally like metal pens, so it surprises me I like this one. It surprises me even more. I even bought it. But this, again, I'm trying to use up ink, so the black ink I'm trying to use up right now is Omas Black. So maybe you can look at the picture that I will attach in the video description and decide if it expresses the Omas Black in the same way as the Lamy 2000 or not. I'll leave that dealio up to you. But this is a pleasant pen to write with. As far as a converter, I have to put their silly little squeezy converter in it, which I'm not a fan of, but hey. You know, and it's a little pricey because it's the stone-washed edition. Yeah, I paid extra to have it look worn out. So if I ever laugh at a teenager for buying pants with holes already in them, they can point to this pen and laugh at me. To be clear, the only pen that went with me to Valley City, which I said I was going to talk about here, was the Lamy 2000, which you can't see. That's the only one that went with me. But it wasn't that kind of trip. I got there, it was late, I went to bed, I got up, I didn't even go for a walk. I got up, ate breakfast, went to the meeting, spent all day at the meeting, and then spent another 5 hours driving home where I went to bed. So, no real time for writing other than my note-taking during the day, which I use a different tool for that now, which we'll have to talk about one of these videos someday, but not today, because I got exciting things to share. But before I get to the exciting Valley City things, two other things that came up, because it's been a while since I've done a Pens in Use, so I want to share them. One of those things is this beauty. Let's turn up the light. Okay, so this is the Aurora 98 I reviewed earlier this, probably this month, I don't remember. But anyway, I was taking it apart here and showing you the converter inside, and I said, it's got this weird spring mechanism, don't know why. So I had it set on my kitchen counter to clean it, and I accidentally bumped it. You know, touched the part while I was taking it apart, and it went, no, it's not going to do it. Oh, come on. You did it by accident before, gosh darn you. Let's try that again. There. And I thought I broke it. I don't know why I had trouble just then. I took it off screen, pressed it, and it did it, so I put it back on screen and did it again. So, yeah, this is to turn the piston. You're not actually meant to take it apart down here at all. So when I was worried about the longevity of whatever they had in there to hold it together, shouldn't have been, because according to the folks who restored it, it's actually, they put in that silicone gasket to replace some glue that had been there, because they wanted to take the pen apart to fully clean it before sending it to me. So, yeah. And then I got reaffirmed in this when one or two commenters said, hey, idiot, the pen isn't meant to come apart that way. And now I know. The other update I wanted to do was with this Bismarck. So, I reviewed Did somebody forget to clean this pen out? Yes, I believe he did. Shit. Okay, that was embarrassing. Let's not talk about that. So I was worried about this end, which is the ball point. And I was worried, how am I going to replace that? Let's see if I remember how to get into the damn thing. Need something to lay this on, because ick. Yeah. That was in my pile of clean pens. But I looked down in here, which is hard for you to do, but I see no mechanism. So I thought, well, how do I get that out? and I was suggested a replacement. They suggested a specific model, but I just realized I'm not going to bother taking it out because they're not at all the same size. So yeah, the person who recommended these Monteverde D1 ballpoint, nope, too skinny. So even if I could remember how to get that out, it's the wrong type of refill. Maybe I pull, I don't remember. I'll have to get out the manual again. But anyway, we'll take Mr. Fountain Pen off for a little bath. And we'll keep on searching for short ballpoint refills. And who knows, maybe I'll find a pen that these short Monteverde refills fit. But that's enough of pens. Let's turn to the other exciting stuff from Valley City and otherwise. So those are the pens and inks I've been using this week. I brought none of them with me, so I'm going to film that part when I get back home. But I just felt like filming this tonight because it's going to be late when I get home. But anyway, I kind of missed a few weeks. It'll get to be later, and then I'm just like, oh yeah. And just been kind of busy back to school time. I'm settling into the groove. I have my largest classes ever. I guess that's job security. I'm teaching kind of the same course load. I've got 2 sections of freshman physical science, 1 section of junior high STEM, 1 section of high school STEM, 1 section of physics, and 1 section of chemistry. So it keeps me busy, I guess. One of my goals this year, which I think by this weekend I will be at, is to be a week ahead on having everything just copied and ready in all my classes. I'm very good at staying caught up with grading. Sometimes I get a little behind typing it into the computerized grade book, but I'm very good at staying caught up on grading. I learned that lesson the hard way when I started teaching that, you get behind and it gets worse, and then the less you want to deal with it and the worse it gets, and next thing you know, you got... And everybody said, where is my test? We took that a month ago. You haven't entered any grades in the past 2 months. Yeah, don't do that. Get it graded quickly. So that's what I do. Other than that, garden is doing very well. I picked Monday night, I guess. Kind of a combination of over the weekend and then Monday night. I picked all my banana peppers. I was going to stuff them all Sunday, and it turned out there were a lot more banana peppers than I estimated, and I ran out of stuff to stuff them with. So then the bright idea occurred to me to pickle them. So Monday night, after I was at a junior high football game, I pickled them. So we'll see how these pickled banana pepper rings turn out. I want to give them a while before I eat them, let the flavors of all the spices and stuff soak into them. I tried a recipe a few years ago that was too sweet. This was a lot less sweet, so I'm hoping that it will be good. Tuesday night I had a junior high volleyball game. See, I have to go to these because I teach that one junior high class. And, of course, I'm one of the yearbook advisors, so I have to make sure there's pictures. But anyway, went home then and I made stuffed poblano peppers. So I ended up having to pick almost all my poblano peppers. And, I had a little more meat than I needed, so I thought, well, maybe I'll need an extra poblano or something. I needed a lot of extra. So I don't know if people stuff them more full than I do, or if poblano peppers are usually bigger than mine, or what the deal is. But I was out in the dark with my flashlight picking more poblano peppers just to have enough peppers to put all my filling in to make these stuffed peppers. Then this weekend, I am working all day, Saturday, working the concession stand by myself because all my students are in activities and will not be in town. Luckily, it's a 7th... I'm sorry, this is going to sound horrible to a few of you. Luckily, it is a 7th grade girls volleyball tournament, so there won't be a lot of people there. So I think I can manage this concession stand by myself. For whatever reason, the way schedules work in the fall, that's about the best time for me to take, because I can manage that by myself. And if it gets really bad, usually I can guilt trip somebody into, can you just come in here and help me for a few minutes, please? So, actually, if it goes like previous years, I'm going to have plenty of time. So remember, I talked at the beginning about my goal of having all my stuff printed and ready a week ahead. I mean, I plan a week ahead, but, having everything ready and out and just in folders and stuff, that's my new goal for this year. So I'll have plenty of time to do that. Plenty of time to work on photographs, plenty of time to sit and twiddle my thumbs. I'll take along a book too, although I'm going to try and focus on doing school stuff while I'm there. Not so much the reading, because one of my other goals a few years ago was to, when you're home, you're not working on school. And I think I've done pretty well adhering to that, but I'm trying to, do even better. So this is a prime opportunity. If I'm at school and working, I'm going to do school things. So if I get a few weeks ahead, oh well. So the other big excitement, I am in Valley City as I record this. So that's a nice long trip from where I live. I want to say 5 hours or so. It felt like forever. Plus there's the time zone change, so it's an hour later here than it is at home. And my computer time hasn't changed yet, but a little past 11 their time. Even by my time I should be in bed, but now I'm all keyed up from driving so far and getting up and walking to my motel room and unpacking, so now I'm up doing videos. But anyway, I'm here doing an AI conference. Now, I mentioned to my students I'm at this AI conference, and I think most people, when I say I, would think, artificial intelligence. No, I live in a farm and ranch area, so when they hear AI, they're not thinking artificial intelligence, they're thinking artificial insemination, as in how you get cows pregnant and stuff. Not using a bowl, without being too graphic. And, why would you go to an AI conference? Well, I probably wouldn't go to that kind of conference because I really don't care about how to get a cow pregnant. As long as somebody's doing it, go for it. That's not my kind of thing. But anyway, what I think I'm going to do, since it hasn't happened yet, I'm going to record the ending to this video. But then tomorrow after the conference, depending on the weather, I'm either going to sit in the car, which I get to use the school car, which was nice. I'll either sit in the car, or there's a really nice park here in Valley City. I may go to the park instead. And record, what I got out of the AI conference. It'll be kind of part of my processing it, because I'm going to be asked tomorrow, or Friday, when I get back to school, because it's Wednesday night right now, what I got out of this conference, so it'll be good to report that. So, yeah, expect an insert about here where I talk about my AI conference. So, this is the bit of pens and use that I've been waiting on. I went to an AI conference in Valley City, North Dakota. I guess it would have been last week, as I speak to you now. Maybe the week before. Anyway, AI conference in Valley City, North Dakota. And no, I'm not going to make the joke that almost every single speaker made about which type of AI. Because it's an agricultural state, get it? No, not going to do that joke. Okay, just did. But Valley City has a university in it. It's a smaller university. I'd say there maybe were around 100 people at this conference. I don't know how many of them were high school educators. The conference definitely wasn't geared to high school or even elementary educators. It was geared more toward professionals who work with AI and toward the university level. But I wrote a few things down, so I'm going to share them with you. So one of the big things is that AI is definitely here to stay. It's not going away. And it's going to be a big, big, big revolution, kind of on par with the Industrial Revolution or the Agricultural Revolution. In fact, one speaker, the North Dakota University System Chancellor, Mark Hegerot, has a TED Talk, which I did link down below in the video description. But anyway, he summarized it in our session. But he talked about how his great-grandfather farmed with his brothers when they came to the United States, and they were aided by animals and very basic machines that were powered by animals. Then, kind of in the transition period, they got a threshing machine, and there were some laborers and some animals. And then it became a threshing machine and a tractor with fewer animals. And he has pictures of all these stages of their farm's evolution. And then it got to be, so there were no animals, a big tractor, and some workers. So that whole period was kind of the transition. And then the final picture, single human with equipment. And it was a human and machine teaming to farm. Just one human. He mentions, and it is true, the empty towns all over my state attest to this. It was very disruptive, a loss of a lot of jobs, and but at the same time it opened up new possibilities because you weren't stuck doing agricultural work. You could do other things. You could go to the city and get a job. There were more possibilities opened, even as other possibilities were closed. So the big theme of this conference was just not to fear AI. It is going to be disruptive to most jobs, and probably even in our daily life. And any kind of change like that, especially large-scale change, is uncomfortable. We can't predict what it's going to look like. One speaker talked about the classic science fiction novel, Robert Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. One major scene involves racing through this base on the moon to find a working telephone. In 1966, nobody really saw this coming. One of the keynote speakers was Judge James Baker. He encouraged us all to get involved in the governance of AI. Most of his talk was about national security implications of AI. He talked about AI and disinformation and misinformation. He talked about a lawyer who had used AI to write a legal brief in which the AI invented cases. And he mentioned the Moynihan rule, which is you are entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. We need to tell some of our friends that. And then the Lincoln rule, which is to always study both sides. Other speakers talked about how AI is already causing disruption. 25% of companies are using AI due to the labor shortage. Workers will need their human skills, their uniquely human skills, in order to use AI well. And automated jobs are just going to disappear more and more. Overall, the message was the importance of those human strengths. Other talks deplored the addiction to technology that we have. One speaker referred to it as dopamine prisons. I had to notice just then that just how many of the people around me were on their cell phones during this presentation that they traveled to Valley City to listen to. Another speaker described AI as an alien mind that shares our cultural understandings and biases. Several of the speakers were from the education world. Now, like I said, not high school necessarily, but they were from the education world. I know one of my own colleagues, an English teacher, has expressed some concerns about how she doesn't know anymore if student work is theirs or AI. And a group of professors from the humanities department, including a theater professor, spoke about this. They talked about the tension between the process and product of writing. They noted that we need to stop teaching students to write like machines and to start writing like humans. And what does that mean? Because that's fun to say. Humans employ things like critical thinking, creativity, curiosity. So we should really see the AI as a collaborator, not as a replacement. Other speakers talked about how they used AI professionally. AI is going to lower barriers of entry for small businesses. We listened to part of a podcast made entirely from notes. The AI took the notes and turned it into a podcast with two voices that sounded almost real, except they talk better than I do and don't clear their throat or go, "Ugh," or anything like that. You can use AI to do letters and responses for your business. You can create a content expert using AI, which will answer questions. One speaker talked about, I'm sorry, I don't remember the game because I'm not in the gaming world, but some very complex board game, I guess, like a role-playing like Dungeons and Dragons, only harder. And she created an AI to find out the rules because she's... I don't know the game. She's got some role where she's got to interpret rules. In the education world, we were reminded that AI does not think, it maths. We were also reminded that we need to have an AI policy and guidance in our institutions. And for student work, we need to focus on the process more than the product of writing. And it turns out that AI detectors are actually not very reliable. One speaker was very young. He was a college student named William Gruby, and he started a consulting business called Groovy Education. He does AI training for high school well, I shouldn't say high school, for school districts. He was about, I mentioned him by name because he was about the only one that really talked about the high school level. And he noted that students are crying out for guidance on appropriate use of AI. Students are using ChatGPT instead of their skills, and he mentioned Tony Wagner's 7 Essential Skills for Students. So I'm going to try to link to that list down below if I can find that list. Students need to change their question-making strategy to promote... Teachers need to change their question-making strategy so they write questions that promote critical thinking, something the AI can't do. We need more in-class activities because I'm probably going to notice if you say, "Hey, ChatGPT, could you write me a little paper on density labs?" I'm going to notice. Back during the lockdown and for a while afterwards, we were supposed to be doing stuff online rather than paper, and I would get students would Google things because they could and do it on their tests, and I'd just be like, "Okay, 14-year-old freshman, you don't know what this is. You do not. This is a very college-level explanation of this phenomenon, and that's not the level you're at." And, you just ask them to explain it, and don't remember. Yeah, I can tell you why. So more in-class activities, more project-based learning, and just in general make it harder to cheat. And he said, you need to teach the limits of AI. So overall, I was glad to see this conference held in North Dakota. Apparently, they do plan to make it an annual event. I did miss out on the swag bag somehow, but I don't like those anyway. I don't go to a conference to get stuff. But apparently, there was one good thing in it that I didn't know about. But it did contain a copy of an AI journal from North Dakota. I wanted to see a little more focus on AI in my world, but maybe next year. Heck, maybe I can become an expert and be one of the presenters next year. So we're in that awkward transition part of the AI revolution, kind of like I was talking about with Mark Hegarot's great-grandfather. And it was obvious at this conference, I'm going to use AI more. I use it a little bit for a few little things, but I want my students to get a chance to use it too and learn how to use it in a useful way. So I'm trying to design an AI assignment right now just for my high school STEM class and maybe one for my junior high STEM class. I'll figure out how I want to go about it, but I can get them access to Bing, which is Bing Copilot, which is Microsoft's AI, because the students all have a Microsoft account in the state of North Dakota. But I am moving forward without really any kind of direction, just plowing ahead, saying, well, what's going to happen? How bad is this going to be? So I hope the future conferences will be more specific, especially in terms of education. It was a good beginning, but it was also really flipping a long way away. It takes me 5 hours to get to Valley City. I live in the middle of nowhere. I live the southwestern part of the state. There's nothing here. It takes me an hour just to get to an interstate. So, by the way, on the topic of AI, I did get to drive the school's car to Valley City, which is where this was held. I don't know if it's exactly AI, but the car had collision sensors, something my 2000 Toyota Camry doesn't. And I didn't know it had collision sensors. Till I stopped at a gas station, about an hour from home. And as I'm backing up, the collision sensor went off, and I'm just like, what's back there? And I saw nothing. There was nothing. And then the collision sensor kept going off the whole way home, and I thought, are there deer that close to my car, or what is going on here? So I think the collision sensor was defective. The one time I could have used it was, it wasn't Jamestown, but it was an exit near Jamestown, and I looked, because I was... in the regular, you're supposed to be in the right-hand lane unless you're passing. I saw a car pulling onto the interstate, and there was a very slow-moving vehicle up there, so I moved over to the left-hand lane. And luckily, I looked like this and saw the car that I had pulled over to let in moving over to my lane to get around the slow-moving vehicle, only I was in my lane. So I moved over halfway into the ditch, and then they saw me, and they're just like, whoop! And then they heard the rumble strips on the other side, and whoop! And they course-corrected, and that was that. But no collision sensor went off for that. It's just luck that I looked over and said, oh, shit, I'm going to die. And so AI isn't always what it's cracked up to be. I actually did a small experiment. I had a little bit of time left on Friday, so I have a few students with names that are, I don't want to give you one of their names, but they're names of like cities. Let's say Austin. That's a city in Texas, and I don't currently have a student named Austin. So whatever it was, one of the students had kind of a name that sort of went with cars, so I said that student's name on a car. And it drew something goofy. And then I tried the person who's a city name, but not Austin. And I said, Austin on a car. And it drew 2 fluffy puppies and a teddy bear sitting on a car. I'm just like, not seeing it. None of them made any sense. One of them is named after a bird's body part. Again, none of them made any sense. And it's just kind of... Sometimes you can create interesting things with AI. Sometimes it just... I know I created a thumbnail. I guess it was last summer I did a video on notebooks. And I want to do another one of those. But I had it create a thumbnail. I had AI create a thumbnail. And even though I gave it the exact title of the video, which was also created by AI, by the way, it couldn't spell it right in any one of the thumbnails it generated. So I ended up coming up with my own thumbnail. I was disappointed. So am I afraid of AI? No. I think it can be misused for sure. But wouldn't it be wonderful if you could use AI like, oh, this kid needs a lot more practice with density. Rather than me trying to generate all that practice, maybe AI could do it. So, anyway, I see potential there. I'm not afraid. And I'm looking forward to possibly in the future AI will take over some of the less fun parts of my job. I don't like correcting. I just tell me at the end, what do the kids know and what don't they know? What do I need to teach better? What do they know just fine? That's what I want to know. I don't want to correct every single kid's paper. It's boring. Monotonous. I hate it. Once in a while you read a clever answer, but for the most part... So, I want AI to help me with that. But AI is not going to replace me interacting with the students individually. Me coming up with different activities and so on. The AI may help me come up with some activities. It may help me design better labs or something, but may help me come up with rubrics. But I think of jobs like accounting, which is a job I would absolutely despise. I can see where AI would be very handy because AI can know all the laws. And the human can worry more about the interpretation rather than, going through all the books and looking for certain things. And I am betraying my ignorance here of what exactly an accountant does because not an accountant. I am a treasurer for a small organization. And I don't like doing that, but I just do it anyway. So, there you go. So, AI conference, I hope I can get to it again next year. And I hope we can get some K-12 stuff at the next one. They asked for feedback, and that's what I told them. So, anyway, I want to thank you for watching. Actually, I probably already recorded that in my motel room the night before the AI conference. So, we'll see. May have to record something sitting on my computer while I edit this together. I don't know. So, yeah, back to Motel Me. All right, so that was my little AI summary. I can't believe how many bits and pieces I filmed this Pens in Use in, and that is why it has taken me, 2 weeks to get this thing done. And I added a new piece last night. So I'm going to close with my usual outro with filming some random road in North Dakota. But in this case, it's going to be a random road, and I will try to put the road number on there, but it's going to lead into Rame, North Dakota. Now, why Rame, you ask? Glad you asked. At the AI conference, I know I mentioned in my talk that one of the presentations I went to, this guy played a podcast made from research that he had done on a specific political issue here in North Dakota that you don't care about. So I decided to play with that software last night, and one of the things I made, I took my outline, because I have a driving video I need to put out. It just isn't out yet. But I have a driving video I want to put out about the teacher shortage, because it is still real, and it's worse than last time I did a video on that. So I had a whole outline of all my research, and the research. So I was going to put the links into a Google program called Notebook LM, and have it make a podcast. Well, I like to put a lot of my links into archive.org because I know the information will be saved there. I didn't count on archive.org getting hit by a DDoS attack. We don't need to get into the cybersecurity thing, but just trust me. The website is down. I don't know when it will be back up, but it was down last night. It was down today. Hopefully by the time you see it, this is back up. But yeah, archive.org. Archives, the internet. So, some politician gets invited to be vice president, then he quickly goes and scrubs the embarrassing things he tweeted on Twitter, or X, or whatever you call it now. Archive.org still has it. So I like archive.org because the educational films and many other things, but it's also handy for doing a snapshot of a link you use, and then you put that in your list of resources, and there it is. Well, with them down because of the DDoS attack, I uploaded my outline, and it made a podcast out of it. And I was impressed. What I'm thinking of is at least a 3, possibly 4 episode driving video thing. It did in, 11 minutes or so, maybe less, fewer. Then I thought, well, I do want to play with this research feature. So you may know, if you've followed this channel long enough, that I did a video many years ago on Rame, North Dakota. So I kind of did the same thing on that video. I used the archive.org resources, and I can't get at them, but I put that video in as a resource, and then I went to Google and just did it quickly. I wasn't trying real hard. Googled Rame, North Dakota, and put in the first few pages of useful links about Rame, and had it make a podcast. And you're just going to be able to tell these are not people talking. This is all machine generated. This is a computer making these voices. This is a computer throwing in the type stuff, all the human things, all the laughs, and it's really kind of convincing. And part of me says, oh, there goes all these radio shows on NPR or what have you. But then part of me thinks, maybe not necessarily, but what a way to take a bunch of information and collect it. And I found the framing interesting. If you watch my Rame video, which I will try to link in the video description, I have... it's kind of all over the place. Like, here's Rame, here's Rame, here's Rame, here's this cool thing in Rame. Oh, let's go around the school. And then I start talking about the old newspaper editor, Mr. Arthur Fuller. And the podcast decided to frame everything about Rame around Mr. Arthur Fuller, which was interesting and very humanizing. So, hope you enjoy. If you don't enjoy, I don't watch. What can I say? Any of my videos, you don't like them, don't watch them. Yeah, instead of my usual outro, we'll do that. So I want to thank you for watching. And if videos like this interest you, where I talk about fountain pens both new and old and at all price points, I would invite you to subscribe. And hey, what do you think is the future of AI? So we'll close with the footage and a surprise I found near Rame. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All right, so ready for a wild one. We're going deep on, well, it all starts with this small-town newspaper guy, Alfred D. Fuller. He was like a big deal in Rame, North Dakota back in the early 1900s. Sounds pretty normal, right?
Small-town life.
Exactly. But then you start digging into the sources. And let me tell you, we've got a Find a Grave Memorial. Did you know that's a website? For finding graves, like where people are buried.
Yeah, I've come across it.
Right. So we've got that. We've got pieces of a book written by, get this, his relative. And it turns out Alfred's life, not so normal.
Not normal at all. See, this isn't just your average, oh, he had a secret kind of story. The picture these sources paint of Alfred's life, downright scandalous for the time. Because, you see, Alfred, born Hattie Fuller, assigned female at birth.
Hold on. So are you saying this guy, this newspaper editor, pillar of the community, he was a transgender man living openly at a time when that was basically unheard of? Wow. Okay, so we got to rewind, right? Back to the beginning. Hattie's story starts in 1876 in Chamberlain, South Dakota. So picture this. You're growing up with your siblings on a Sioux Indian reservation. And it's the late 1800s, a time of massive upheaval in the American West.
It's the frontier, right? Still very much alive. And just to add to the picture, her father, he wasn't just living on the reservation. He worked on government projects, building schools and churches for the Sioux. Oh, and he owned newspapers, too.
Wait, newspapers? So both Hattie and her brother followed in their father's footsteps.
It's an interesting parallel, isn't it?
It's more than interesting. It's, well, before we get out of ourselves, back to Hattie. I mean, growing up on a reservation during those times, that couldn't have been easy, especially with events like the last Indian War on the Rosebud Reservation in 1890 happening right there.
And intense, right?
Totally. So how do you think all of that shaped Hattie's worldview?
It's hard to say for certain, but we can guess those experiences had a huge impact. I mean, think about it. A childhood spent immersed in a community facing incredible pressure, caught between two worlds.
And this was a time when the U.S. government was pushing hard for assimilation of Native American tribes.
Exactly. The Fuller family was right there in the thick of it.
Makes you wonder about the dinner table conversations.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, were those experiences the seeds of questioning, of challenging the norm? Did it make Hattie more aware of how arbitrary those lines people draw can be?
It's a fascinating thing to think about, isn't it? Like, do these early experiences hold the key to understanding why Hattie made the choices she did later in life?
It's like the foundation of a life that would go on to challenge conventions. Right?
Yeah, that's about.
So, okay, let's fast forward a bit. It's 1903, Hattie's 26 years old, and she makes a decision. She leaves South Dakota, packs it all up and heads for Chicago, the big city.
Yeah.
Bustling, 1 million people.
What do you think it was about Chicago that drew her in? Well, you got to remember, at the turn of the century, Chicago was booming. Opportunity everywhere. You could be anonymous, reinvent yourself, a world away from life on a reservation.
And reinvent herself, she did.
Yeah.
Because this is where Hattie makes the decision she's going to live as Alfred D. Fuller. From now on. And this wasn't just like picking a new name out of a hat. This was stepping into a whole different role in society.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. The early 1900s, women had incredibly limited options, couldn't vote, jobs were restricted, their lives were basically confined to like being wives and mothers.
So for Hattie to choose to live as a man in that era, that was radical.
No other word for it. And it really makes you wonder, did she feel like this was the only way she could truly live life on her own terms?
Like she had to become someone else to become herself, in a way.
It's a lot to process.
And it gets even more complex. Because in 1910, Alfred marries a woman named Inez.
Wow.
Openly living as a married couple. In 1910. Were there even legal ramifications for that sort of thing back then?
Oh, definitely. Huge risks. Same-sex relationships, taboo, illegal, often both. And for Alfred, living as a man but with a birth certificate that said otherwise, the legal trouble they could have gotten into. It's a lot to think about.
So they were really putting everything on the line for their love. It really makes you wonder about Inez,
Yeah.
What kind of woman was she? Did she know about Alfred's past?
Right. It's frustrating how little we know about her. The sources are so thin when it comes to Inez and their relationship, but what we do know, incredibly intriguing. Talk about an unspoken bond, an incredible amount of trust between them. I mean, they were living a truth that could shatter their lives at any moment.
Yeah. Living on a knife's edge in a time when the consequences were so much higher. But their story doesn't end in Chicago, does it? Because around 1916, Alfred and Inez, they relocate to Rame, North Dakota.
Rame. In 1916, it was practically brand new, only been established a few years earlier when that railroad, the Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul and Pacific, came barreling through. Tiny, remote, way up high, 3,192 feet above sea level. Highest point in all of North Dakota, I looked it up.
Hold on, so let me get this straight. You've got this couple, they're already living a life that's, let's face it, defying every expectation of the time, and they choose to settle down in a small, isolated town in the middle of nowhere. Talk about a juxtaposition.
Right. You have to wonder, did they see Rame as a place to disappear, start fresh, away from prying eyes? Or was there something about that remoteness, about that small town life that offered them a sense of freedom, a place where they could be themselves without the constant fear of judgment?
It's like they traded the anonymity of the big city for the, well, let's call it the intimate embrace of a small town. Everyone knows your name, right?
For better or worse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's another layer to this, isn't there? I mean, this wasn't just any move for Alfred. This was a homecoming, a return to his roots. Because you know what he does? He goes back to the world of newspapers.
Like father, like son. Or, well,
Right. So Alfred, he steps right into the role of newspaper editor for the town's paper, called the Rame Review at the time. Later on, it was the Farmer's Review for a bit. This kid who grew up surrounded by printing presses, now he's holding the power of the local news. It's kind of poetic, in a way.
Full circle.
Totally. Okay, so to recap, we've got Alfred, a transgender man living a very public life as a newspaper editor in a brand new town in the early 1900s. I mean, that's already a story and a half. But wait, there's more.
Oh, there's so much more to uncover.
It wasn't just any town, though, Rame. I mean, it had its own thing going on, history-wise.
Oh, absolutely. You've got the Fort Dilts State Historic Site not too far from town. It's, commemorating this wagon train journey back in 1864. Got attacked by Lakota warriors. So this whole region, it was a battleground just a generation before Alfred shows up.
Wow. Talk about a place where life was still raw.
Yeah.
like the echoes of the Wild West were still hanging in the air.
Oh.
Makes you think, what did Alfred think about all that history, about the people who came before him, the challenges they faced?
Adds another dimension to his story, doesn't it? Here's this guy living with this incredible secret in a town built on, well, secrets of its own.
And he's not just surviving, he's thriving.
Right.
He becomes this respected figure in Rame, involved in everything, civic groups, men's clubs, even serves on the school board.
Wow.
A transgender man in rural North Dakota in the 1900s, helping to shape the minds of the town's children. It's kind of amazing.
Really makes you think about the impact he had. People trusted him, confided in him. They saw him as Alfred, the editor, the school board member, their neighbor.
So did anyone in the town actually know about,
His secret. As far as we can tell, only his doctor knew. A Dr. Weber.
Wow. Talk about a secret to keep. Especially in a town that small. It really speaks to the level of trust between Alfred and his doctor. I mean, do you think he confided in Dr. Weber out of necessity, like for medical reasons? Or was it more about having anyone to share that truth with?
It's a good question. And it reminds us that even back then, even when things were so different, so much less accepting, people still needed that connection, that understanding.
Absolutely. And it seems like Alfred really found that in Rame. He and Inez, they built a life there for over a decade. But like you mentioned earlier, the sources are pretty vague on the details of their relationship, right?
Yeah, it's frustrating. We know they eventually divorced sometime around 1930. Makes you wonder, what happened? After all those years, did the weight of their secret just become too much? Or was there something else going on?
Right. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the more, let's say, extraordinary parts of Alfred's story. But we can't forget he was also just a guy trying to make a living. He ran the newspaper. He was a printer. What else do we know about his work?
Well, he definitely wore a lot of hats, that's for sure. His death certificate actually lists his occupation as printer. And we know he owned and operated this company for a while, the Fuller Printing Company and Publishers.
So he wasn't just reporting the news. He was literally printing the town's stories, right?
Yeah.
Books, pamphlets, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly. Oh, and get this. At one point in the 1930s, he actually moved to San Francisco, worked as a typesetter. Seems like the pull of the printing press was just too strong to resist, but, he eventually found his way back to Rame.
Back to the place where he'd built a life, a reputation, a community. It really says something about the sense of belonging he must have felt there.
It really does. Speaking of Rame, I was thinking maybe we should talk about what it's like today, how it connects to Alfred's time.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, Rame today.
Yeah.
Paint us a picture. What's it like?
Oh, it's still incredibly small. Like, as of 2022, the population was only 181 people.
Wow, that's tiny.
Right. But it's that kind of place, close-knit, everyone knows everyone, just like in Alfred's time.
It really makes you wonder, are there any traces of Alfred's story still there? Like, in the town's memory? Are there any old-timers left who might have known him? Heard whispers of his past?
Wouldn't that be something? I mean, it really speaks to how these stories, they transcend time, they become part of the fabric of a place, passed down, even if it's just in hushed tones.
It makes me think about those Rhyme Gala days you mentioned, the turtle races, the rodeo, the whole shebang. Did Alfred, a man living with such a secret, did he find any peace in those quintessential small-town events? Or was it pure anxiety?
It's a great question. Can you imagine? Him at the parade, at the turtle races, was he able to be present, enjoy those moments? Or was that fear of being outed, always lurking just below the surface?
Right. And would anyone have even blinked an eye if they knew the truth about him? It's fascinating to think about.
Isn't it? But you know what? We don't have to just speculate. Remember that book I mentioned? Hattie. She was wired differently.
Oh, right. By Alfred's great niece, Lois Reimers.
Turns out she stumbled upon Hattie's story while researching her family history. Felt like she had to share it with the world.
I mean, talk about bringing a hidden history to light. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I got to ask, though, what made her decide to actually write the book? Was she worried about, backlash, given the subject matter?
Well, it seems like Reimers, she was really driven by this desire to, honor Hattie's experience and to advocate for more understanding, acceptance for, as she put it, those wired differently. Sharing the story, it seems like that was more important to her than any potential controversy.
And it's a story that really makes you think, even now, 100 years later, like how many other Hatties and Alfreds are out there? People who lived their lives on their own terms, even when society was telling them, no way.
That's a question worth asking.
So many stories lost to time.
Exactly. And it highlights how important it is to preserve these narratives. Every single one. It's like a piece of the puzzle, right? Helps us understand not just the past, but also, I think, the present, the ongoing struggle for identity, for equality. It's still happening.
100%. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We started with Hattie's, let's just say, unique upbringing on that Sioux reservation. Then we moved to Alfred's life as this, respected newspaperman in a tiny North Dakota town. What a journey. But what's the takeaway here? What can we learn from Alfred D. Fuller, the man who was born Hattie Fuller?
I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? What resonates with you?
Honestly, it reminds me that history, it's not just dates and battles and, all that stuff we learned in school. It's about people, real people living real lives full of, all the messy stuff, the contradictions, the complexities. It's easy to look back and judge or simplify, but Alfred's story, it reminds us that people have always challenged the rules, pushed boundaries, tried to live their truth no matter what.
It makes you think about whose stories we're not hearing, right? Whose stories haven't been told, because history is written by the
victors.
Exactly.
And it makes you wonder, what if Alfred had been born 100 years later? Would he have felt the need to hide? Would things have been different for him, for Inez?
It's impossible to say for sure. I mean, sure, we've come a long way when it comes to LGBTQ plus rights acceptance, but we're not there yet. Not by a long shot.
Not even close. Stories like Alfred's, they remind us that progress, it's not a straight line,
Right.
It's messy. It's a fight.
2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Exactly.
But even with all that, there's something so inspiring about Alfred's story, don't you think? The risks, the challenges. He chose to live authentically. He built a life with Inez. He contributed to his community. It speaks to the resilience of the human spirit, our need for connection, for belonging.
It reminds us that even when it feels impossible, people can find the courage to be themselves. And maybe, just maybe, their stories can inspire others to do the same.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, folks, it seems we've reached the bottom of this deep dive into the curious case of Alfred D. Fuller. We've explored his life, his secrets, his legacy, and uncovered a story that's both extraordinary and, when you think about it, incredibly relatable. It's a story that makes us ask those big questions about identity, about society, about what it means to live a life that's true to yourself. And really, that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. It's not just about the past. It's about understanding ourselves and the world a little bit better.